Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us here for another episode. As always, wherever in the world you're listening to us from, whatever platform you're listening to us on, thank you guys so much for all of the support, all the messages, all the things that you've sent to me, all the things that you've sent to the show. Really appreciate that. Love hearing from you guys. Love getting to talk to you guys about hoops and about coaching and making those connections. So keep that coming. And as I said before I started recording with my guest, I personally know a little bit about this topic, but I'm certainly not well versed in it as some of you who are listeners are, even and as my guest is, because we're going to talk about comparing a couple different circuits here. We're going to talk about comparing the EYBL, which is the Nike Elite Youth Basketball League, and then also comparing and contrasting that with the Free Stripes Select Basketball, and kind of talk about what the differences are between the two, what recruiters maybe look for at these events, things that maybe parents can be informed about in order to make informed decisions, and just some of the things that maybe are going on in these organizations that my guest is kind of likes, maybe things that he sees. So it's really interesting for me to get to know more about this side of the game. And for you listening, I think this is going to be real fun for you to maybe dive into something that you might have some familiarity with, but this would be a great opportunity to learn a little bit more and become more informed about some of the things happening here in the basketball world. So without further ado, very happy to be joined by my guest, who's USAYB Gold Certified coach. I know he does work on the travel circuit coaching as well. He's also a father of a high school player, which we'll talk about also. Very happy to be joined today by Coach Robert Holloway. Coach, again, appreciate you being able to come on here and spend some time talking to us. How are you today?
I'm doing good. My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Yep.
It's really a pleasure.
Coach, let's go ahead and get started with your basketball journey and your coaching journey. Talk us through where this great game of basketball has taken you. How did you get involved in coaching, and how'd you get involved with the GA Stars that you're with right now?
My basketball journey, of course, started in high school. I played some high school ball, played a lot of neighborhood basketball, but I just grew up in Chicago, so basketball was just a part of my DNA. And then, of course, once I got married and we started having children, we had boys, so it was natural for them to pick up a basketball and want to play organized basketball. So, of course, I stepped in and started training them, started developing them. So, our oldest, he's 24 now, so he's graduated out of high school. I didn't do as much with him because I had no idea how hands-on you had to be as a parent that wants your kid to get the best out of organized basketball. So, fast forward to our youngest son, who's a senior in high school now, with more hands-on. I got into coaching when he was in sixth grade. And that showed me that the more I can get my hands involved, the more I know, the better it'll be off for him. Because, everything's about community and relationships. So I learned that early on. And I'm grateful that I did step in because I was able to help out a lot of youth on their journey and met some really nice and great parents along the way also.
Awesome. And Coach, let's kind of dive into that a little bit about raising a child and working with a child who plays basketball. There's a lot of stories and a lot of things out there, good, bad, and otherwise about, things that go into raising a basketball player when you're really connected with the game itself. So I wanted to ask you, Coach, about what have you kind of learned about the game, and what have you kind of learned about, coaching in general by working with him, by being able to kind of attend his games and kind of be there through his own basketball process? What have you kind of like learned along the way through his journey?
I learned discipline and I learned also to be a great listener. One thing that I learned early on as a coach that's really, really compassionate and, competitive. I want to win, but I also had to look at the development side. So I had to have patience, just understanding, he's a child. Everything that I say is not going to translate to the court. He's not going to pick up on every little detail of the game. but understand where he is and where we're trying to get to, and just, trust the process. So I definitely learned a lot of patience coaching my own son, because, not only on the court, you tell him a few things on the court, but you find yourself coaching them at home and talking about the game and talking about the game. And then you have to catch yourself and like, hey, let be a dad right
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
You gotta kind of balance it out. So I learned over the first couple of years, hey, you gotta have balance and let them be a kid also.
So what is that like now as you're watching him play? You said he's a senior in high school now. So now, you're kind of at the point where I know you're still coaching him, but obviously he has his own coaches now and he's on a team and you're being a supportive parent now on his journey as well. What is that like in terms of like how do you balance kind of being a supportive parent and being there to watch him and support him versus also still trying to like help him and coach him, even though obviously he has other coaches and other people that he works with? Is that something that's kind of like difficult to you? Is that easy to you? What's that like?
It's kind of both. It's difficult and easy because it's a game by game situation. Because you try to just be a parent and sit there and watch the game and just root them on, but at the same time, you're like, hey, if I was a coach, I would be doing this. Hey, you know what? Play a little bit more defense. Hey, don't pass up that shot. So I kind of have I would say now that they're at the mid-season point, I've kind of just fell back and watched versus just trying to overcoach. But I give him some tips after the game and just help him, see what he did good and see what he can work on and improve in also.
Yeah, it's that's I know that that's always been something that has kind of been challenging to some, basketball parents who I talk to who, they see what's happening on the court and they're like, man, like I really want, the coach to think about doing this or doing this, but they don't want to be, the parent that's trying to, encroach on the coach or anything like that. So they kind of have to balance like, all right, I just gotta, not say, I don't want to say anything. I don't want to, be that parent. At the same time, I want what's best for my kid too. So you're right. It could definitely be a challenge sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Coach, as we kind of dive into this topic here, some of our listeners might not be too familiar about, the Nike Elite Youth Basketball League, or they might not have a lot of familiarity with, Free Stripe Select. And so I wanted you to kind of maybe explain and introduce what those are and the differences between those two and what are those organizations and how are they kind of different from one another?
Okay, well, starting with Nike, they're the top of the food chain. Like that's the most competitive circuit you're gonna find out there. And the reason it is because Nike's the biggest shoe brand. So Nike goes after the best players. And when you play on a Nike circuit, you're playing against the best kids in the country. So they only want the most qualified players on those teams. So as coaches, that's our job to go find the best talent. Most of these kids are nationally ranked, and we go get the best talent to go compete on a national level and hopefully win the Peach Jam. That's always the goal every year, to get to the championship and win Nike's Peach Jam. So, with that being said, you have Adidas on the other hand, who's right after Nike. They're the next biggest shoe circuit, which they have a lot of top competition also. But when you compare the two, you got kids like Cooper Flag, you got kids like Caleb Wilson. These are kids that are guaranteed to go pro. They're
Hmm.
playing on the Nike circuit to go play the best competition in the nation. Now, I've seen kids who, they get on a Nike team, like, for example, Georgia Stars, they get on the EYBL team and they don't perform well and they realize, hey, my talent isn't up to this level. Not meaning I'm not a talented player, it's just I'm not an EYBL ready player. So some of those kids, they step down to like an Adidas team and they find success. So you have to know your talent level to be able to, kind of fit in well and get what you're supposed to get. And then even in comparison, when you talk Nike EYBL, when you get in the Peach Jam and a lot of those circuit tournaments, when you're playing on that Nike circuit, when you
Hmm.
look in the rafters or you look on those sidelines, you're seeing head coaches. You're not seeing assistants and scouts. You're looking at the head coach of Auburn, North Carolina, dude Kansas, Kentucky, they're right there to make sure they get eyes on these kids and see, okay, yeah, he's just what I thought he was.
And so with your the organization that you're a part of, the GA Stars, that's EYBL, correct?
Yeah, Georgia Stars. Yeah. Shout
Okay,
out
so
to Norman. Shout out to Norman Parker, also the founder of the Georgia Stars. He's been around since the Nike EYBL circuit started.
so Coach, let me then in turn now. I know we talked about this before we started recording. So right, as of this recording, right, we're kind of deep into the traditional high school season, and as you mentioned that you're out kind of scouting people and looking for people. So kind of talk me through about what is it that you're looking for? You talked about, some players are ready and they're EYBL ready and some they get there and they're not quite ready. But when you're out scouting people, what is it that stands out to you that makes you think, okay, this person might be a good fit, this person might be ready for this level?
Yeah, what we do, we actually go after what the college coaches are looking for. They want players that compete hard. They want players that have the will to win. So we have to go after those type of players that appeal to these coaches because at the end of the day, it's about the child, it's about the parents, it's about the player getting into college. So we only want to get the kids that show stat wise, even in performing in their high school games that they're ready and they're above the average competition. So when we go scout them, a lot of times we are looking at the rankings, the state rankings and the national rankings, and we look at those kids that are in our area. And Nike allows you to recruit from the states that touch your state also. So that's another bonus. But overall, we're looking for the kids who compete the hardest and have that will to win.
Is there things that as a kind of think about what it is that you kind of said there? Is there things that you can look at when you're scouting a player almost like in terms of their like intangibles, kind of those things that maybe or don't show up on a stat sheet? Because when you have such talent that's out there, and I'm sure you see a lot of talented players, sometimes the difference between somebody who you might be looking for, and somebody who, maybe they're not quite, somebody who's going to be your caliber. Sometimes that could be, a real thin line and real thin difference. So what are some of those intangibles that kind of can separate, two really skilled players?
We look at stats, so we also look at when it comes to, let's say, skill level like ball handling. We may have one position open on our team, like we may have a spot for a point guard,
Hmm.
maybe a backup point guard. So he has to be able to bring what our starting point guard brings. Can he break down the defense? Does he have a high IQ? Can he get his players involved? Is he vocal? Is he a tough defender? Does he pick up 94 feet? Like we look detail for detail, and we want the next player to come in to be able to challenge our starting guard or the player who was there the year before. We're just keeping a competitive environment. So we want the best talent to come compete, even in our practice against the best talent.
That and so that, competitiveness, that's something that, obviously you mentioned about the stats as well, but I imagine then you're really looking for those guys who are looking to compete all the time. They're looking to, sharpen their skills against the very best. I imagine these guys that you're bringing in and you're recruiting aren't backing down from any challenges. They're looking to get after it and compete with each other every time they're out in the court with one another.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why you constantly hear the term dog being used and thrown
Yeah.
around on the EYBL circuit. They like, hey, we're looking for dogs. We're looking for a dog. Oh, he's a dog. It's just that dog mentality where you're not backing down. You're alpha in the gym and you're showing that I'm ready and you're not backing down from any challenge, not even in practice.
Yeah, and if you get, a bunch of guys with that sort of attitude and they go after each other with that sort of attitude, it's only going to make them better. And so I imagine, it's a win for everybody because they compete with one another, they work hard against each other, and they're pushing each other to become better. And the results hopefully will just end up speaking for themselves because everyone's pushing each other to become that much better.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely the culture.
So in general, there's so much, right? There's so many, different teams and so many different things that are happening in EYBL and free SSB. But coach, in general, are there things that you look at when you look at these kind of organizations that you really like in terms of the way that they're run or the way that they're doing things? And are there things that maybe you would wish to change or things that you wish were a little bit different? What's kind of your assessment on how things are with these organizations kind of as a whole?
I mean, as a whole, even at, on the independent level, when it comes to the independent teams, those are non-shoe teams for those who aren't familiar with the term.
Hmm.
But the key thing is development. And I think it's really starting to bother the NBA at their level that they're understanding that these kids are coming in, they're talented, but they just don't know how to play the game. So that falls back on the high school and the shoe teams. I mean the travel ball team because a lot of times kids come in and they barely get a practice in, or you got kids from out of state and they can barely get to the practice for the travel team. So it makes it hard for a kid coming into a Division I college and he's got talent, he can jump, he can shoot, but does he play the game the right way? And coaches are starting to understand that this kid's only going to be here for 1 year. I can develop him as much as I can in this 1 year. He's a 5-star kid. He's going pro. So the pro, the NBA, they're looking at it like this kid still has a lot to learn to play at this level. He has the talent, but skill wise and IQ wise, he has a long way to go. So they're starting to, come down to the circuit teams, the Nike teams, and say, hey, these kids need development. So they took it even a step further. So Nike has a middle school circuit now. They have the EYBL junior. So they're, really putting emphasis on development, get these kids younger, develop them. So by the time they touch college, you can basically say they're pro ready.
They're putting that investment in younger and younger. So is it, as you kind of said, that is it just like fundamental type skills? Is it where they're just not their understanding of the game just isn't being developed enough, or are they fundamentally lacking things? What is it that you feel that these pro teams are saying that these guys are lacking when they get to that level?
I think it's the understanding of the game. Like you will see, a top talent. He can give you 25 or 30 points a game. He can shoot 45% from three, but can he make the right decision? Is he making the basketball play, or is it just about his personal stats?
Mm.
So
So.
that's what you're dealing with.
And I hear that, coach, and I'd be curious about kind of your assessment of this. I hear sometimes people say things about, at the travel circuit, AAU level, different levels where guys, they're playing all the time and they're playing to be seen and they're playing to be noticed. So they might not necessarily play team basketball all the time because they're trying to, stand out and be noticed and make sure that they're getting attention. And so is that something that you see kind of happening at all these levels? Is there a certain level of like trying to get theirs because they want to be seen, like no matter what the travel level is?
Yeah, you get that, especially during these live periods when the recruiters come out. You get that, but I think it falls on the coach because if your coach has a no tolerance policy where you get out there and you play your role for the team, players are going to buy into that if he's stern. Now, if he goes out and, he's lackadaisical and players kind of just, push their way through and say, hey, take bad shot after bad shot, but they don't get subbed out, that makes the entire program look bad
Mm.
because you're playing in front of recruiters. But again, that falls on the player, but, coaches and programs have to take accountability for that also.
So what would you say for you as a coach? How are you and the staff that you're working with? What is it that you're working on with your guys to make sure that they are kind of developing and learning the game? What is it that you're intentionally doing to make sure that, hey, we're going to make sure that these guys understand the right way to play this game?
One thing we do is we actually, keep these kids in the gym even in the off season. We're working them out. We're making sure they're training, making sure they're in the weight room. So we're hands on all year round. So by the time travel ball season comes around, it's not like, hey, what you've been working on. We're in communication.
Mm. So there is no like, hey, you're gonna be gone for a while and then we'll come back and link up together. It's like, no, we're consistently working together sort of thing. So I know what it is that you're working on or know what it is that you're doing.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess that's a great way to do it because then you know that they're not going to fall into any bad habits because you're consistently keeping up, keeping track of them. No, that's really good. Um, for parents that are listening, Coach, what information should they maybe know or things should they be aware of um, about these different circuits that you mentioned in order for them to think about what might be the best choice if they do have a player who maybe is getting attention from EYBL and from Free SSB and some of these other circuits, how can a parent really know like, hey, I think this is what's best for my player right now, or I think this is what's best for my player. What advice would you maybe give to a parent on how to make kind of the best decision for what would be best for their player?
A lot of times it's tough because I can't say, sometimes you deal with like single parents, single moms, and they don't really know a lot about travel
Hmm.
ball. So the best thing I can suggest is do your research, try to talk to people other than the coaches, people around the program, people who used to be with the program, people who played for this coach, things like that, because you want to do your research. Because what you're going to typically hear is, hey, we want your son. We're going to build our team around him. We're going to make sure he gets the looks and gets the exposure. You're going to hear that from coach after coach after coach after coach. And then when you realize that, oh, okay, he's told this to 10 parents, and every kid that comes on his team thinks they're going to build the team around him.
That
So,
they're gonna be the guy. Yeah.
yeah, so you really got to do your research. And then don't think you're locked into anything. Like everything is, subject to change. Everything is basically optional. You're not locked in. Now, granted, when you're playing on an independent team, you do have to pay money.
Hmm.
So nobody wants to pay their money and lose their money and, watch their child sit on a bench. So understand the talent level that your child is at. Of course, you start high and work your way down, but at that, you got to be honest. You got to be honest with yourself, and your child has to be honest with himself or herself and understand their game and their abilities. After that, I would say, it's not about playing with your friends and, going to the popular team. It's going where you fit and you want to go where you want it also. So it's basically like college. You got to really do your research. You gotta, talk to the coaches, ask questions, talk to former players, and you have to understand what the team needs. Do they need someone to fit what you do, what you bring to the team, versus just trying to go on a winning team or a big name team, a popular team, and probably not going to get the minutes you want, not going to get, the exposure you want. So it's a lot of research that goes into this.
Yeah, there's people who, and I'm sure you've been in situations like this where there's people who go to like a flashy team or a team with like real high name value, but if they're not playing, being on that team doesn't really do them any good, right? Because they're not getting seen because they're on the bench, so they're on the team, but it's at the cost of them actually really getting any of that exposure, and now they're going to get lost in the shuffle, and unfortunately, I'm sure that happens, pretty often, unfortunately, to some guys.
Yeah, it does happen a lot, but honestly, with the Nike EYBL circuit, you
Hmm.
know, the program owners, the coaches, we understand that this is not for everybody.
Hmm.
So I'm brutally honest with the child. I'm not gonna tell you you're gonna come over here and get 30 shots and play 3 quarters and sit 1 quarter. I'm not gonna give you that type of promise when I know that you're not that type of player. I'll tell a child quick, hey, this is a small role, minimal minutes. Don't expect a whole lot if that's the role that I can see you fitting in. But 9 times out of 10, our full roster can go be a top kid somewhere else. But if you want to take, you know, not a lead role type of position when you come over here, that's fine. But understand also when you sign up for EYBL, 92% of the kids that play EYBL go to Division I college. So you're not taking a loss regardless once you get on that roster. It's just where you comfortable being on this roster.
And I imagine, and I'd be interested to hear what your experience has been like this. Like, I imagine that must be a real adjustment for some guys who maybe are used to and are like, the main guy in their high school or maybe on another, travel team that they played. And now they're taking on this new role where they don't get as many touches, they don't get as many minutes, and now they're kind of figuring out how to still be a contributor and be an effective basketball player with that kind of reduced role. I think for some guys, if they really embrace that and they really, take that challenge and say, hey, I may only get, these few minutes, but I'm going to, make sure I do X, Y, and Z when I'm in there, or here's some other things I can make sure that I'm doing, even if I'm not necessarily in the game, to make sure I'm still engaged and, doing my part. I think if some guys can learn that sort of skill set, that probably has a lot of value too.
I agree. And the reason I agree is because we're in an era where you deal with a lot of egos, popularity. You got NIL money out there. You got these kids getting sponsorships in high school. So a lot of ego comes with that. A lot of pride comes with that.
Yeah.
So when you tell a kid that you're gonna play behind such and such, a lot of them will look you up and down like, huh, who, what, why am I playing behind him when I'm a 4 star? But at the same time, like you just said, when you can understand that I can come into this role, play it to the best of my ability, and still get to the same destination. It's just like college. You can be the man on your high school team, state championship, 4 star, 5 star, and you get to the college team and they're having you as a backup behind a senior or having you a role player with minimum minutes. You have to humble yourself. So EYBL kind of prepares you for that. Now, granted, somebody's going to be the man of the team, but
Hmm.
even if you're not, you have to be okay with it if you trust your coach to still bring the best out of you as a player.
Yeah, no, you brought up a great point about, even when these guys go into college, their role is going to be most likely a little bit different because they're not going to be, like the dominant ball person. They're going to be with a bunch of other high level athletes. So to, learn how to, make the most out of your limited touches or perhaps your limited minutes, man, that's super important. So no, that's a great point that I'm glad that you brought up. Something that you mentioned, Coach, and I was just kind of, a little bit curious about as well from an earlier answer that you gave about, you know, not everybody is necessarily going to be, EYBL ready, and they're not going to be, maybe that isn't going to be the best fit for them, and maybe they'll shine and maybe they'll prosper, somewhere else, like we talked about with, whether that's at a different, circuit necessarily, if that is, at Free Stripes Select or whatever the case may be. Is it for those guys who maybe just aren't quite, successful at EYBL, is it really mostly like a skill issue that they're not quite there yet? Is it usually that sort of thing? Is there something else that makes them like maybe not quite ready for that level?
Yeah, it's definitely skill. You can have kids that dominate high school ball. You got kids on the Puma circuit, you got kids on the Under Armour circuit, and then you got the Adidas circuit. Uh, Nike EYBL is different. Like it's different. You got the Bruiser twins. These are top kids in the country. You can't just dominate on a Under Armour or Puma circuit and think you're gonna dominate on a Nike circuit. It's just not gonna happen. The talent level is like it's amazing. Like it's very, very high. So you have to be that guy to be able to come and get any kind of good stats on the EYBL circuit.
Yeah, it's a different, no, that's a different level. And but as you mentioned to your point, right? Like it's fine if maybe that's not, quite where it is that you're gonna, shine if you're somebody who, you could always, I imagine, right? You're at, a different circuit and you build up your skills there, and then really become successful at that level, and then maybe it works out where you're going to EYBL. But I think for maybe some players, right, they think, like you said, right, they do really well in high school, that, oh, I'm ready to get up to this highest level. But no, there's levels to this, right? There's layers that need to be climbed, or things
Yeah,
that need to be done first before you can just kind of jump right in against all the best players in the country.
yeah, absolutely. Like I've seen some top talent where they play on an independent team,
Hmm.
never played for a shoe team ever. Like Ace Bailey, for example, at Rutgers. He was a EYBL level talent, but he just, chose due to circumstances, he chose to play on an independent team. That was just the route he took. But he was an EYBL talent. Like he
Yeah.
can come on that EYBL and still have success. But not he didn't necessarily need to go that route to get to the destination. He still ended up at Rucker, and he's going to go more than likely top 5 in the draft.
Yeah,
But
there's
that just goes
multiple
to
routes.
show, yeah, yeah, you just that just goes to show everybody doesn't have to go the same route to get to the destination.
Hmm. So obviously in these events, coach, a lot of college coaches, a lot of recruiters, these live periods especially, there's a lot of attention being paid. And obviously some of these guys are real top level guys and maybe already have, commitments and offers. I'm sure all of them do to some level. But of course there's a lot of, recruiting and a lot of, things happening behind the scenes at these events. So talk about like what is specifically when these college coaches are attending and these recruiters are attending, what are the things that they're really dialing in and looking for? How do they kind of identify from all of these really top select guys who are the ones that they really want? And like how do these players separate from one another to really get noticed to be like the top of the top guys?
Well, really, it comes down to the program and what they need. Different programs are going to be looking for different types of players. So the one thing that separates everybody is winning. When you play out there and you play to win and you're a key piece and playing a major role to your team winning that game, coaches take heed to that because at the end of the day, it's only one Peach Jam tournament. It's only one Peach Jam championship. So the kids that advance to that championship and the team that wins, of course, they're going to get the bigger nods, and those scholarships are coming their way because that will to win. And college programs, they're all there to find a kid to help them win.
And so that, those guys then that you have, I'll use your GA Stars kind of as an example, right? You got guys who obviously individually are looking to stand out, but they also understand like the importance of them being successful as a team and being successful and being winners. So they kind of come together and really play as a team, and they're not just looking to, stand out on their own. They're really looking to play that team basketball to get those wins.
Yeah, that's always the goal. I mean, you're gonna have challenges. You're gonna have games where we might not make the mark. You might have a game where you feel like, a couple players took a couple of selfish shots. That's just basketball. But that's our culture. Really, really putting the emphasis on team basketball, compete hard, and go out there and fight to win.
So let me kind of build off of that about um what kind of goes into, those practices that happen at these, high level programs like yourself, about how you kind of get these guys to come together, right? Build that culture, have them play as a team, have them really work for one another and play kind of united. Is that something that is a long process to do, or are you just looking for guys that are going to fit into that culture right away so you don't have to do a lot of work with that? How do you kind of get these guys to, practice together, come together, play on an offense, play on a defense? Like what's the process, I guess, for that all to kind of come together?
I mean, it's tricky. You
Yeah.
gotta, it's always a work in progress. You're gonna have good practices. You're gonna have bad practices. You're gonna have some kids miss practice. You got kids from out of state, those type of things. So they might not get the most out of, the team bonding and the chemistry like the kids in state. So it's always a work in progress. And then even that, that camaraderie. that's something that, you really build in practice. But even for our program, bringing kids in from out of state and things like that, we really just do a lot of team bonding, off the
Mm.
court. Like we get Airbnbs, everybody staying in the same location. We go out to eat. We really, kind of talk about the game and evaluate, watch film, and we hash it out to where we can keep getting better as a program.
One of the things that like I really like about that because I know sometimes, and I'm sure you've seen this too, if maybe some of the independent, club teams itself is where you get guys who maybe are only practicing in the gym, once a week, and maybe it's not that structured or not that, organized, but then they're out there, playing on the weekends, and it's all disjointed. It isn't like necessarily the best basketball in the world, but it sounds like it's an emphasis for your guys to come together and bond together and not all travel teams are doing that. And I think that that's a really, important distinction about what it is that you guys are doing.
Yeah, like I've heard through the grapevine, some of these programs they don't practice at all. You just go play, and I'm like, I don't know how that actually works, but hey, go ahead.
Yeah, well, but that doesn't that go back, I guess, to the point of what you kind of talked about, doing your research and kind of learning about these programs. Because if you're a parent who's investing, a lot of time and a lot of money and really wanting what's best for your kid, you got to know, like, hey, is this program or these programs really going to be like training my child? Are they really going to be, doing that sort of thing? Or are they just rolling the ball out and just kind of hoping for the best?
Yeah, and then for parents too that they wish for their kid to play on a shoe team on a circuit. The kids know they go after the flash. They want the jogger outfits. They want the shoes. They know that this is rare and everybody can't just go to the store and buy this. So when a kid signs up for a shoe team, they're gonna get free free jogger fits, free shoes. They don't pay for games. They don't pay for travel. So that's one of the biggest perks, and of course, you get to have fun playing the sport you love and get the opportunity to get a college scholarship. So the kids, they want the swag. They really want that identity amongst their peers. So it's so fun and so just entertaining to see kids when they step into that arena, and it's life changing for them. But I just look at it as a small reward for the work that they put in.
Yeah, and so let me ask you about like what have you kind of seen as when these guys are putting on those shoes for the first time, they get that uniform, they got the swag like you said, and they're out there like you must see then, players really kind of step into that role and kind of ready for that, moment and ready for that, no spotlight to be on them. Like this is what they've been working for. So kind of talk about, some of the growth that you've seen with players when they step up in that level and shine. You must have some pretty good stories of guys who kind of step into it and they're ready for those bright lights and ready for that attention.
Yeah, and it works both ways. I see
Mm.
guys that, they get to that big stage and they're working hard, practice, they're shining, dominating, and then they get to that big stage, they go from 30 points a game in high school to shooting 30% in the EYBL. So it's a double standard. You can get to the big stage, but like I said, it's not for everyone. But overall, the motivation and the inspiration is there because not everybody gets on an EYBL team. Like even Georgia. Georgia, we only had one EYBL team here, and that's us, the Georgia Stars, for the last 2 years. And they just opened it up for
Mm.
another two teams to play on the EYBL circuit this coming year. So that just makes it even harder, and it makes it more appreciative when a player gets on a 13 guy or 14 guy roster and they're the only team in the state to go on the Nike EYBL circuit. That says
Yeah.
a lot. Yeah, that says a lot about that player.
I mean, yeah, that's a real select group. If there's not many of them out, those teams out there, so you really have to be like the guy in order to be on there. No, that's
Yeah.
awesome. No, that's incredible. So, as a coach, let me kind of pick your brain then. As a coach, when you got these guys who, some of them, like you said, those lights get bright and they flourish and they're doing really well. But then you also have, guys that, it's a bit of a adjustment, it's a bit of a struggle, the level of competition, maybe the pressure, like you said, they're shooting 30%. As a coach, how do you kind of have those conversations with players about, maybe who are kind of struggling and then maybe this is one of the first times they've really faced adversity as a basketball player? How do you kind of work through those guys to and work with them to kind of, get them, you know, through that, rough patch or just kind of get them, mentally right when they're facing this kind of level of adversity maybe for the first time?
You just really take it game by game, even possession by possession, because you
Hmm.
have kids that you know can shoot the ball, and they're just not putting on a good shooting performance. So then you narrow it down to, are they getting to their spots? Is it just, not enough spacing? They're not getting good separation? Are they rushing the shot? Are they overthinking it? You kind of want to narrow down what the issue is. Are the hands ready? Are they getting good releases, good touches, good shots at the good looks at the rim. So it's a lot that goes into that. But at the end of the day, you still got to keep them motivated. You got to keep them inspired and keep them competing because you still got to go out and win. And then you find the best person for the job. If mentally he's just not there, he's rushing the shot, he's panicking, he's overthinking, he's shooting air balls, he's just taking bad shots. Those type of things, you just got to make the adjustment possession by possession so you can still go out and compete as a team and get the win.
And I imagine, kind of like you said, for some of it, it may just be like a mental thing. You take it possession by possession, but also, thinking about these high level shoe circuits, it may just be like little things in their skill set, maybe that they were able to like get away with at the high school level or other travel levels that like, oh, you got to either speed something up or you got to, fix this a little bit on your shot or on defensively. Like you think you're a good defender, but when you're up against these type of players, you got to learn how to do this. I imagine there's kind of these adjustments or this growing period about like, oh, like this is where my skill set needs to be, even if it's just kind of a small change, just to be able to, compete at that sort of level.
Yeah, and you do see that. Like, that's why it's our job as coaches to go out and get the best talent
Hmm.
because you're going to play the best talent and you want to win. And when you see kids that are good at, like let's say they're playing off the circuit, we blow teams out, by 20, 25 game after game, and then we get on the circuit and we could barely get a win. That just shows, the talent is there for, your region or your state talent. But on the Nike circuit, that talent is different. So some kids they get scared, they back down when they see the lights in the big stage. But some kids, they step up. So as a coach, in the season, we can't correct that talent aspect, but we can correct the mental aspect and keep them motivated. And sometimes, you have to bring in another player or two early on in the season to be able to make it down the stretch and get some wins.
Mm. Yeah, no, I like that a lot. Kind of that mental aspect of things is super important, especially with, and then this kind of transitions to another question here. I was going to ask here about, the demands on these players, right? There's a lot of pressure that's being put on them. There's a lot of pressure that they put on themselves, obviously, because they really want to, be, the best of the best and really stand out and get to, the college of their choice. And of course, I'm sure pretty much all of them have professional goals as well. So, you know what is coaches and what is parents in general, what is it that we can make sure that we're doing as coaches or parents to make sure that we're supporting our player the right way, that we're not burning them out or running them to the ground or putting too much pressure on them to the point where it's they don't have this passion anymore? How can we make sure that we're keeping our players heads on right when we're making sure that they're still loving this game and playing it with the passion that it needs?
I would say just know your child. Know your child because as a parent, you feel like they should always be working, they should always be getting better. But at the same time, as a parent, you feel like, they have to be a child. So that's why I say know your child, because every situation is not the same. There's no cookie cutter example to, making a pro player or making a Division I player. Like, first off, you're a student athlete. You got to be in your books. You got to be studying. You got to, get your rest. You got to be working out. So you got to train. You got to practice. You got to work on your individual game along with your team practices. But the reason I say you got to have that balance is because I've seen kids where they're just gym rats. You can't get them out of the gym. Like, they're always working on their game. And those are the kids who really, really get it, and they understand when I'm not working, there's somebody else that is. And those kids, they more than likely a high percentage of them go pro or at least have good success in Division I and Division II basketball because they understand when I'm sleeping and relaxing on my PlayStation or on my phone, somebody's in the gym working.
Yeah, that somebody's putting in the work and kind of passing them by, right? If you're not doing it, then somebody is, and so that's I think that one of the things that you mentioned that sometimes we kind of forget about, right, is that idea of like student athletes and making sure that they're well-rounded individuals, and I think that that's also something that to keep in mind is, for parents who are listening, like, oh, do these coaches at these high level teams or these travel teams that you're going on, do they care about like your child as an individual and understanding the importance of academics? Because how many stories do we kind of see about players who are really talented and like have all the potential in the world, but are academically ineligible or making mistakes off the court? And I think having coaches and knowing that you have a coach who's going to hold them accountable to their academics, making sure that that's something that's a priority. I mean, I think that's huge because, those are going to be things they need for the rest of their life once that basketball stops bouncing for them.
Absolutely. And that happens more than people actually notice that,
Is it?
some top talent kids that they just don't have the GPA. And then a lot of them, they go JUCO and then eventually get to Division I, but sometimes they just can't lock in academically. And school isn't for everybody. That's just the reality. Some kids, they just don't really, thrive in the classroom. But in order to get to the destination, you have to take care of your business in the classroom. That's just the given, and granted, they lowered the standards for the GPA. It's 2.5 now, and it used to be 3.0. So, they get it. But at the same time, you got to put student before athlete. So you have to take care of your business in the classroom.
Let me ask you, Coach, here as a kind of wrap up of a couple more questions for those listening who might be interested in getting on board and coaching on one of these shoe circuit teams, whether it's, trying to, get involved in some way with EYBL or trying to get involved in something like Free Stripes or another one of these, Under Armour or another of these shoe circuit teams. What advice would you give to somebody who says like, hey, this is where I want to be. I want to be working with guys at this level. I want to get involved in this. What advice would you give on how to get their foot in the door?
Just like anything, you got to show success. Success leaves clues. So, build your resume and build relationships. It's always about relationships. So even though, this coach may be on a shoe team, this coach has an independent program or he's on an independent program, we all see each other. We're all at the same tournaments. We all gonna cross paths at some point. So it's all about relationships. And like I said, build up your resume. Show that you found success with your teams, which nobody can overlook success. And then you build that relationship and the opportunity presents itself. And more than likely that's how the coaches got
So is that well, when you said success, are you talking about like success on like the independent like travel or high school related things? What would you mean by what sort of success do you think kind of stands out to coaches who coach at these kind of high level shoe circuit teams?
Definitely. And just whatever program you're with, whether it's high
Mhm.
school or travel ball, you want to show that you can win. You want to show that you have a coaching mentality or a coaching style that translates to wins. And you develop kids that want to go out and compete and win. So if you can do that and you can continue to do that, a lot of programs already know who you are. So when that opportunity presents itself and you show interest, more than likely it's a win-win for both parties.
Yeah, you gotta network and you gotta build those connections and you gotta really get your name out there too. No, no, I agree. And you know, for you being able to work with, these guys who are really talented and really skilled, what have they kind of taught you, coach, about whether it's a game of basketball or how have they kind of helped you develop as a coach and become a better coach? Because I imagine that when you work with guys of this skill set and this kind of level of talent, maybe it kind of helps you as a coach kind of learn some things or pick up on some things or kind of grow you a bit as a coach. So as much as we as coaches kind of teach our players, what has working with these guys been able to kind of like teach you and help you kind of learn and grow as a coach?
One thing I always understand is, uh, I'm talking to the person before the player. So I coach the young man. I talk to the young man and not just prepare him for the basketball court, but also the person off the court. So we coach character. We're always talking about, the do's and don'ts, especially when you're talking about a high level nationally ranked kid, number two, three in the country. Those kids, that comes with a lot of pressure when you have that status. So you have to walk a fine line. You have to, keep your circle tight. And you really, really have to just stay locked in because it's so easy to lose all that opportunity that's in front of you. But if you have the discipline and the right circle and you're grounded, your faith is in order, a lot of times that transfers to the next level and you go back and you come thank that coach or that teacher. Those people stay connected to you in life somehow because those people poured into you and helped develop you to be the person that you are.
I like no, I like that a lot. I think that the relationships, right? To me, like I, working with a couple, high level players of my own, which I've been fortunate enough to do so. I think that I've personally learned a lot just about how it is to almost like kind of carry yourself when you have, a lot of expectations on you. And it's kind of got me to thinking about, man, if, these players can carry, all of these, expectations that they have put on them, the expectations that they have for themselves, being a student athlete, taking care of other things. Some of them are taking care of things in their family. If they're managing all these responsibilities at, such a young age, like, man, that's kind of an inspiration for me personally to really make sure that I have all my stuff in order, that I'm taking care of everything I need to do because I got, 16, 17-year-olds who are handling all this. Like I can definitely take care of my own business sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're dealing with, especially at the teenage level, when you
Hmm.
start dealing with, 15, 16, 17, sometimes they'll humble you because you get these high IQ kids and they start talking some jargon. You like, wait, hold on. He's literally a coach on the floor, and he's like, wow. And he's a 4.0 student, so you get it. But at the same time, it's like, okay, now he's making me step my coaching game.
Yeah, so you get some of these guys who have like I'd be really curious. You get guys who get like this real like kind of deeper understanding of the game. Is that they're able to just kind of read things, call things out. They're kind of talking. What are those conversations like with these guys that got this real high basketball IQ?
Yeah, it's amazing, man. You just get in the huddle with these kids, and you see things one way on the floor, and then they break it down another way, and you're like, wait a minute, I saw that, but I didn't see it the way you saw it, and I didn't even think to explain it the way you explained it. So it kind of just makes you step back for a minute, and that made me a better coach because I always appreciate my player's opinion. I'm never the guy that do this, do that. Hey, what do you see? Hey, okay, well, we tried that. That's not working. We're gonna do this. All right, oh coach, they're doing this now. Okay, all right, I get it. I saw that too. So it's always a two-way thing with me when it comes to coaching kids.
No, that's and I imagine, the coach, that must be real like rewarding to have those kind of conversations when you just it kind of goes full circle talking about how some of these professional teams are like, man, these guys, some of them just don't have the understanding of the game that we wish that they did. So when you get a guy who's like, man, this guy 4.0, like he gets it, he understands the game. This is a guy who's really gonna, maybe take off and really go places because he's got that understanding of a game that it seems like a lot of these professional teams are feeling like they don't have as much as they would like anymore.
Yeah, it's rare. It's real rare. But when you get those kind of kids that come in your program, you're like, wow, okay. And then for me, my son playing with
Hmm.
these kind of kids too, I just show him the little things that you can take from this player and that player, and all that. At the same time, it's just molding you and helping you build your game.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Coach, to wrap up here, there's a couple questions that I love to ask every guest. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here with this first one, which is thinking back on your coaching career and all the experience that you've had as a coach. What is a specific moment from your coaching career that you think by sharing it, our listeners would be able to learn from?
I would probably say, just understanding that you get kids that come in day after day and give you their best, and they go home to some situations that you're not aware of, and you just kind of see them put a smile on their face when they walk in the gym, and they'll come in and work hard, and they tell you thanks coach when you tell them, give them a compliment or something like that. But a lot of times they go into a broken home, and sometimes they don't even have a meal. But for coaches, we have to look for those signs because a lot of times kids are good at hiding it. And one time I had a kid, he played with me one year, and then the next year I called him up and I was like, hey, we got trials coming up. You gonna come out? He was like, man, coach, I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't even have a pair of shoes to come practice in, to come try out in. I was like, what? He was like, yeah, coach, things are rough right now. I was like, man, I'm sorry to hear that, but if this is something you really want to do, man, don't even worry about shoes. We got shoes for you. And if this is something you really want to pursue, we're gonna figure it out if you want to play this season. But he has so much going on in his life that he actually didn't come to tryouts. He didn't end up playing with anyone that season, and he had to actually go get a job to help take care of some bills in the house. And this is, I think he was 16 at the time. So, a lot of kids, they really do have it rough outside of school, but sometimes you just will never know.
Yeah, and that's incredible. Like the things that it's amazing sometimes the how well our players can act or be composed, or you see them on the court, or and sometimes in my case in the classroom, and it seems like everything's going well and they got a good support structure, and because they're so level-headed and so mature. But sometimes you get to know some of them and learn from the experiences that they're going through or the things that they're going through, and it's like, man, like I had no idea that you had all of this kind of going on in your life, and it's tough, and it's tough. And I just can't imagine that type of situation that particular player must be in. But there's a lot of adversity, and hopefully he's able to kind of come out the other end and be stronger, and still have a bright future and do all the things that he wants to do.
Yeah, definitely. He had to grow up fast. I can't
Yeah.
say that.
Yeah, no, that's yeah, for incredible, coach. To wrap up, coach, I love to give every guest kind of what I like to call this like 60-second soapbox. I like to use it kind of as a platform to kind of allow you to get kind of a final thought, a final idea, kind of a closing message, something that you just kind of want to leave the listeners with. You can take it kind of any direction you want, basketball wise or coaching wise. I like to give this to you, coach, as your own soapbox. So I'm just going to go ahead and give you the floor, coach, and let you kind of take it from here.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. I just would like to say, basketball is a competitive sport, and that's something that you can be determined to do, and that's something that you might step away from. But just understand that if you're going to get into it, give it your all, do your homework, do your research, but train like crazy. Be a relentless trainer and fall in love with the development part, fall
Mm,
in love with the training part, because that's going to give you your reward at the end. Don't get complacent, don't settle, and block out the noise. You're going to see other people having success in different areas around you, but don't let that take your eye off the prize, because your journey is just what it sounds like. It's your journey. So go in and just work like a maniac, train like crazy, and get a good support system around you, and just stay locked in on your mission. Your mission is to get better. And when you get better, the reward is going to come because you put in the work. And just understand that everybody's not a Division 1 player. Everybody's not an EYBL kid. But that doesn't mean you're not going to get to the destination that God set out for you. but just go out, work, 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 and your reward's gonna come at the end.
And I think to your point, because I completely agree, it gets sometimes harder than ever, coach, right? In the age that we're in with social media and everything, to constantly be comparing or wondering what somebody else is doing or wondering what else is going on. But, all that time that we spend doing that, we could just be, working on our own game or working on our own craft, and we get a lot more benefit out of that than, watching what other people are doing, right?
100%, man. 100%.
Awesome. Coach Holloway, man, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing some insight about something that's so um, fascinating and a lot in the level of basketball that you're involved in, and there's a lot that maybe we think we know that we really don't, or there's some mysteries that you were able to kind of unravel and kind of say like, hey, this is what it's like out here on the shoe circuit, this is the level that you need to be at, this is what the college coaches are looking for, how you bring guys together and everything. So I just want to say thank you for being able to share some insight and knowledge on it. I know I learned a lot from it because it's something I'm not 100% familiar with as others are. So I appreciate you being on here, being willing to share. Best of luck to you. Best of luck to your son as well as he, figures out what his next steps are going to be. I wish you guys both the best, and I appreciate it again, Coach. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Coach, and I wish you success too this season on your second half of the season as well with you and your team. And again, thanks for having me. Really did enjoy this interview.
Appreciate all of you guys listening. Thank you guys so much. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.